Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of Kabir Considers. In this video we're going to react to the 10 states with the lowest IQ, aka the 10 dumbest states. Now this is going to be an interesting one because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people who, from these states that don't think that they have a low IQ, and obviously there's going to be people, geniuses in whatever state, in every country. But I guess this is going to be a national average of, IQ test scores, averaged out to get the basic sort of baseline level of IQ and intelligence. But at the same time, is IQ intelligence? Someone might have a relatively poor IQ, but they might be really good at other things like writing or construction. So yeah, let's see what comes up on this list.
You're looking at the states with the lowest average IQ. If you have a low IQ and don't know what IQ is, I will tell you. Most people are aware of the term IQ and know it as a reference to a person's intelligence, but the term and the associated measurements are more than just numbers. What does an IQ test measure? How does the IQ test accurately capture the measurement of intelligence? I'm going to tell you. The first thing you have to do is take a mental age test. This test determines what age you and your brain are working at. Then you got some calculating to do. To calculate a person's IQ, you take the person's mental age and divide it by their chronological age. Next, divide that number by 100, and you have the person's IQ. In full disclosure, I didn't know how they calculated that and come up with the number until I started researching this video. So that's what we're doing today. We're looking at the states with the lowest IQ. Got it? Get it? Good. Let's take a look.
Let's go. South Carolina.
Number 10, South Carolina. South Carolina is one of the many states that has never been really known for its brain power. They do have some incredible universities. They just have a lot of backwood areas that have a lot of people that do a lot of stupid stuff. Case in point, a man in South Carolina was driving down the road and saw his neighbor had a Joe Biden sign out right in the middle of the lawn. He couldn't take it. He had been doing a little drinking after work and decided to drive onto the neighbor's lawn and destroy the offending sign with the front bumper of his truck. As you can imagine, the neighbor who owned the sign and the lawn was pissed. He bought a new sign and planted it right where the other one was. 2 nights later, that sign was run over. This went on for 3 weeks. Every night, every other night, every third night, his sign would be run over. So the
back and forth.
And decided he was going to find out who was running over his sign. So you imagine he's going to buy some cameras, right? Nope, not in South Carolina. They don't do things that way. Instead, he had a square boulder delivered to his house from a local landscaping company, and he promptly painted a Joe Biden sign on all 4 sides.
I mean, this is funny. You have to admit, this is pretty funny. Like, the constant escalation.
So no matter what direction the truck was coming from, or whatever car it was, he didn't know at this point, they would see that Joe Biden sign, and they would hopefully run it over. The best part about this is the guy who had been running over the signs actually came over and talked to him while he was painting the boulder. I'm sure the whole time he was giggling to himself, knowing he's the one that's been running over the signs. But they chatted about the new addition to the front lawn and, things went on. Life was normal. 3 nights later, the sign-killing neighbor had been at a happy hour and was driving home and saw that his neighbor had a new Joe Biden sign on his lawn, so he ran it over. Sadly, he didn't have a newer car with no airbags, so it broke his sternum and his collarbone. When the police arrested him, and during questioning, they asked about the boulder. Didn't you know about the boulder? You live like 2 doors down. He said he just forgot. The average IQ in South Carolina is 97.8. Here's a little chart that explains where that stands. It's
Can you imagine the shock on the guy when the sign didn't just fall over, but instead he was like, oh!
average. A very superior IQ is 130 and above. 120 to 129 is superior. 110 to 119 is high average. And 90 to 109 is average, and that's where most of these will fall on this list. When you get below 70, it usually means you could do things like play hide and seek by yourself, and it's challenging. There's a website called surprisinglives.net, and they listed jobs that are good for people with certain IQ numbers.
That's actually not a bad idea for a website, to be fair. I mean, because not everybody does an IQ test, but if you know that you haven't got the biggest intelligence or the highest level of intelligence, it's a good resource to have, like, because you still want to live a life, don't you? You still want to be independent and be able to buy things and, you know, provide for yourself and a family.
And they've got a big chart. If you have the IQ of the average South Carolinian, which is 97.8, and for any sheet metal workers or any other occupation I bring up during this is just a typical thing, just an average. I'm sure you excel at a lot of things. Sure, you got your doctorate from Stanford and you're just doing sheet metal work because you really enjoy working with sheet metal.
Heavy on the sarcasm, mate.
Number 9, Texas. Texas is another state that has some real...
I have a feeling that we're going to see a few, like, southern states on here. Just because I think, you know, southern states where maybe the average income isn't that high, a lot of the brightest people might move to go somewhere where there's, like, a higher income potential. But I could be wrong. Do you guys agree, disagree?
Really good universities, and they have some pretty good school districts too. They get high marks in a lot of them. Just like any state though, you're going to find some that are horrible. But overall, when you're looking at the education attainment level, Texas does pretty good. Their IQ isn't great. There's a great story came out of Texas some years back about a guy who I'm sure was working with a pretty low IQ. He decided to jump the fence at the local police department. He actually stole the lights off the top of a cop car and attached them to his 1978 Ford Pinto with the fake wood paneling along the side, and drove up and down Main Street and was surprised they figured out it was him that jumped the fence at the police parking lot. The average IQ in Texas is 97.4. A nice job for a 97.4 IQ level, heating and refrigeration mechanic. Don't complain to me about that. That's according to Surprise Living.
I mean, so it's slightly higher than South Carolina, but not much more. I'm surprised by that because Texas is huge. You know, you've got the massive cities of Houston, Dallas. Maybe the population.
Number 8, West Virginia. Well. Anyone else surprised West Virginia's on this one? West Virginia is a beautiful state with beautiful people. But there's a whole bunch of jokes and stereotypes about these people and their intellect. Been going on for decades and decades. And the thing about stereotypes and jokes, they don't just come out of nowhere. Stereotypes, which you shouldn't use, if you really think about it, they're earned. And there's a difference between racism and stereotypes. Now, the IQ of the people out in the hollers and the people that are living in the cities is like night and day in this state. The average IQ of West Virginia is 97.2. And this one kind of surprised me. They suggest a good job for someone with that IQ is real estate agent.
I mean, to be a real estate agent, I'm not saying it's an easy job, but it's not like being a doctor or a surgeon, is it? You know, you're showing people around a home, you know, you have to sell, you got to be persuasive. I mean, if you're really intelligent, it probably helps, but you don't really need it, do you? But I suppose you do need to know about like permits and housing laws and things you're allowed to do to your house, things that you're not allowed to do.
Number 7, Arkansas. Arkansas, like West Virginia, has earned a lot of its stereotypes and jokes. That being said, the most common joke about Arkansas is people dating relatives. Chew on that for a while. I once saw a comedian that said, Little Rock, Arkansas, where a below average IQ is above average. He said he was checking into a hotel in Little Rock, Arkansas, and they misspelled his first name. First name's Ron. He said he had to correct them twice. The average IQ of Arkansas is 97.1, and surprising lot.
Is it me or are these going down? I thought he was going to do it in like, you know, descending order in terms of like from, you know, leading up to the worst, but they're going down. I
suggest a good job for that IQ is flight attendant.
Wow, really?
Number 6, California. Yeah, you know, you're not going to find a lot of low IQs on the western side of the state. It's when you start getting into the California backwoods of the desert, that's where you start finding some lower IQs. There's a whole lot of people in California that are working with half a deck. The driveway doesn't go all the way to the garage. Back around 2015 or 16, I read a news thing about a guy who had been arrested for going into women's restrooms, like public restrooms, sticking his cell phone underneath or over the stall and taking a quick picture and running out. He gets caught. He's in court. He's convicted. He has to get therapy and he's on parole. He leaves the courtroom, goes to the women's bathroom across the hallway and starts taking pictures again.
What a dummy. What are you doing? What an idiot. Did he forget? He kind of forgot. There's no way. He just couldn't stop himself.
They arrest him in the courthouse, right outside the courtroom he just left. His defense was double jeopardy. He thought because he was already convicted of that, he couldn't be convicted of it again.
Wow.
Could you just imagine the judge and the lawyers in that room when he tried to use that defense? The average IQ in California is 97.1. A good job for that IQ? Sewage plant operator. That is fitting because there's a lot of sewage in California.
Sewage plant operator. These jobs are sounding very technical for someone with quite a low IQ. Because any mistake and it could be a catastrophe.
Number 5, Nevada. I'm sure with Nevada, like a lot of the states, you're going to find the lower IQs out in the middle of the state. And in Nevada's case, it's out in the middle of the frickin' desert or Mars. They look very similar. I think the best example of a person with a low IQ I saw on an episode of Cops in Las Vegas. The police roll up on this guy. He's soaking wet. Apparently, he'd been roaming around the fountain collecting change. He wasn't homeless or anything like that. He had just gambled all his money away and had no way to get home. So the cops tell him to throw all the change back in and tell him to not do it again. They go to the end of the block, do a U-turn to go back the other way, and they see him in the fountain again. It wasn't until the third time when they arrested him. Nevada's average IQ score is 96.6, and the recommended job for that IQ is dock worker.
I mean, again, surprised. Like, I thought it would be, it is mostly southern states, in fairness. So, I wasn't too far off.
Number 4, Alabama. Yep, the heart of Dixie ain't knocking it out of the park when it comes to IQs. They rank 4th in the nation for lowest IQs. They also rank 4th in the nation for people who mistook vodka for Listerine. Alabama's got a long list of problems, and low IQ isn't even one of their worst problems. Having Birmingham within your borders, I think, is a bigger problem. Alabama's average IQ is 96.4. The suggested career for that type of IQ? Auto body repair.
I've just realized I myself have done a low IQ thing. Like, I said that I didn't realize that he was going in descending order in terms of IQ. And I was like, why isn't he doing that? These are getting worse. Maybe I should get my IQ tested.
Number 3, Mississippi. They never disappoint. Whenever you're working on a video or a list or talking about a horrible state that's got a bunch of problems, they always show up. Mississippi's got a lot of problems. Being consistent in the suckage side ain't one of them. There's a newspaper called LA Weekly, and they always had the weird of the news. It was this section where they just found stories across the country that were just weird. They had a story about a guy living in Mississippi. He woke up one morning after heavy drinking and found someone had broken into his house while he was sleeping and taken everything. Just took everything he owned. He calls the police. The police eventually show up at his house and they start taking the report. One of the police that were at his house happened to look in the backyard. Everything he owned was in the backyard. So the police go next door to see if, the neighbors had seen anyone break into the house in the middle of the night and do this, and what was the story. And one of the neighbors said, yeah, I could see him doing that. It was like 3 a.m. It was him doing it, nobody else. Now, I'm not sure if that's an IQ problem or I don't know what that is, but it's a great story.
That's not an IQ problem. That's something else. This guy sleepwalks or something. What the fuck? How did he not know? Like, there's no way, that he could move all of his stuff while he was asleep. So, was he having, an out-of-body experience or something?
Mississippi's average IQ is 95.8. Suggested career path for this type of IQ? Drywall.
Or plasterer. I see.
Number 2, Louisiana. Like peas and carrots, Mississippi and Louisiana are in the suckage list. There's a lot of things that Louisiana does poorly. One of my favorites is they're the actual worst in the country for workplace safety. It's like far too many people living in that state that are missing fingers. The average IQ in Louisiana is 95.2. Now, when I looked at the suggested jobs for this IQ, I was a little alarmed. One of them is sailor, that's easy, but the other one was nuclear decontamination technician.
It reminds me of Homer Simpson. Like, you know how he's like famously got like a very low IQ, but he's a nuclear plant technician.
Seems like an odd field to get into with an average IQ. You throw the word nuclear on there, you expect the person to have a little education. All right, before we get to number 1, don't forget we have another channel called On This Day. There's a link for that in the description area below. All right, on to number 1.
New Mexico.
And number 1, New Mexico. I was a little surprised at this one. You know, when I'm thinking states with low IQ, I never thought New Mexico would.
When I think of New Mexico, I just think of Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul and like Walter White and all those guys.
I knew they probably wouldn't be knocking it out of the park, but to be number 1, yeah, I guess it's a thing. I started looking at the education numbers. Graduation rate, they kind of paint this picture. Now, obviously, IQ is different from education. I'm not saying one is the other, but usually if you got a bunch of people with lower than average IQ, they're not really pushing through to get the diploma. If you ever get outside the cities in New Mexico, you start running into some people with far below average IQs. There's a whole bunch of people in this state that think there's an underground city of aliens and that the U.S. government has been at war with them for decades underground.
Really?
Somewhere in the mountains north of Taos, New Mexico, apparently this is all going on and has been for a long time. There's a bunch of videos about it on YouTube. One guy's been up in those hills for years. He just goes up there like every weekend looking for the entrance to this underground city. He even puts little listening devices up against rocks and he claims he can hear the battle going on. He's not playing with a full deck. The average IQ in New Mexico is 95. Suggested career path for an IQ of 95? Welder. They also have roofer as a possibility.
Welder? Dude, welding is like quite high risk. I mean, some of these jobs that, you know, were recommended for these IQ levels, I'm super surprised by. Aren't you? Welder? Nuclear waste technician? Sewage plant maintainer. These jobs, you know, if you can't, like, I suppose maybe, yeah, you're only learning a small set of skills that you then just do repetitively, but still it's quite high risk. I'm surprised by that. I'm not surprised by predominantly being southern states. Not to say that there's obviously extremely intelligent people that live in the South of America, no doubt about it. But, you know, a lot of, I think they call it brain drain, like where the smartest people leave for, you know, the places where they can extract the most money for their intelligence. So I'm sure that kind of thing happens quite a lot in the South. But yeah, like, not surprised about the southern states. Definitely surprised with California, though. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.